John Green.
Here.
Noah Myers.
Here.
Louise Pavlin. Shannon Preston. Derek Wright.
Here.
John Devlin.
Here.
Chairman Pinchot.
Here.
And Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams here. So let the record show we do have a quorum. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. Sorry, I got,
Okay, so we do have a quorum of, what is it, 8? No, 7. All righty. Good evening to those of you in attendance and online. Thank all of you for attending tonight's Farragut Municipal Planning Commission meeting. My name is Ron Pinchot, and I am the chairman that will be conducting tonight's Planning Commission meeting. We appreciate that each of you has taken the time from your schedules to either attend or view tonight's meeting to observe how our town government works. All Farragut Municipal Planning Commission meetings are public notice per Tennessee State Law, TCA 8-44-103. All Planning Commission meetings are streaming on the Farragut YouTube channel, and links to the recordings may be found on the Town of Farragut website. Those in attendance should be able to pick up a copy of the agenda at the door. If you are not able to attend in person and are viewing from home, you will be able to see the agenda posted on the Town of Farragut's website. For any persons in attendance who would like to address this commission concerning an item on tonight's agenda, please pick up a blue card at the door, write your name, address, and agenda number that you wish to comment on, and give it to Mark Shipley here to my left. There will also be time reserved at the end of the business meeting for residents' comments on non-agenda subjects, which also requires that you fill out a blue comment card and again, include your name, address, and topic of your comments. On each agenda item, the chairman will ask the town staff for Farragut residents' input. During this time, any Farragut resident wishing to speak to the Planning Commission on that specific item may do so far up to 3 minutes. After being recognized by the chairman, please proceed to the podium microphone in order to be heard and viewed by all. Make sure when you approach the podium, you press the button so we can hear you. To conduct efficient business-like meetings, the town has adopted rules for how its meetings will be conducted. Primarily, these rules are designed to keep the meetings progressing along, assure that all points of view are heard and considered, and to provide common courtesy to everyone. We ask that you observe the established meeting rules when addressing members of the town, staff, and/or members of the Planning Commission. At the beginning of your presentation, please state your name and address for the record. We ask that you address your questions to the chairman. If necessary, the chairman will call on a commissioner or staff member to address your questions or comments. Once you have given your input, please return to your seat. We ask that persons avoid the use of improper language and profanity. Please only address the agenda issues. Speakers should strive to present original viewpoints and avoid redundancy. We ask that you also stay on topic of that specific agenda item. Everyone, please remember we are here tonight doing the people's business, and it's a very important responsibility for all of us. Now I ask that if you are able, please stand for a moment of silence for prayer and reflection, to be followed by a recital of the Pledge of Allegiance to our country flag, led by our Mayor Williams. Thank you. We've established that there are 7 members present, and therefore we have a quorum for tonight's proceedings. And are there any amendments to the agenda? Mark?
No, sir. Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Williams, and we have a second by
Me.
Myers. All in favor of the motion, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? I don't have a place to vote. I don't have a place to vote on my screen.
We supposed to vote on that one?
Oh, we don't just vote on action.
Not voting on that one? On the computer? Okay, that's why. So the motion, for the record, the motion has passed unanimously. Next is approval of minutes. Are there any amendments to the minutes from the January meeting?
No, sir.
Are there?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion from the Mayor Williams, and we have a second from Vice Mayor Meyer. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes? If not, all in favor of the motion, say yes. Yes?
Yes.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, we still don't have it. All right, action items, we have 2, and discussion items, we have 2 as well. So the next item on the agenda is action item 4A, discussion of public hearing on ordinance 26-06, an ordinance to amend the Farragut Code of Ordinances, Chapter 111, Stormwater Management Control, Section 111-7, design standards for detention and/or retention ponds to remove the requirements for stormwater detention in the lower portion of a watershed where engineering documentation can demonstrate that this would have a positive effect on overall stormwater management due to the timing of stormwater runoff.
Chrissy, just so you know, on the approval of minutes, we have 2 abstentions.
Yes, I have.
Okay, got it?
Thank you.
Good evening. This item was discussed at the last Planning Commission meeting. It's an amendment to our stormwater ordinance that would allow properties that are being developed in the lower portions of our Turkey Creek watershed to avoid the requirement for detention of their stormwater runoff. The idea is that the upper reaches of the watershed, they contribute a good bit of the runoff, and the peak discharge does not hit in the lower portions of the watershed until after the peak discharge of these developed properties have released their runoff, or released their peak. Bottom line, it's a good thing. And you can reduce the overall peak discharge from Turkey Creek, Little Turkey Creek, and North Fork Turkey Creek. We have changed the language a little bit from what was discussed at the last Planning Commission meeting to allow properties to drain their undetained runoff across other properties on the way to the main channel, as long as both properties are in the same development. It's kind of like how it works within a subdivision. So all that being said, staff recommends approval of resolution PC 26-01, which recommends approval of ordinance 26-06.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Mayor Williams and a second from Commissioner Green. Do we have anybody signed up to speak?
No, sir.
Okay, any comments or questions from the commissioners?
I have a comment.
You're up.
I have a minor comment on the wording. In the introduction, you use the term where engineering documentation can demonstrate, okay? And I like that. And in a couple places in the documents, you use proven, which I don't like.
Oh.
We're dealing with the weather here, and I don't think we're proving anything. So in the ordinance itself, on the first page 1, where the last whereas on page 1,
Last whereas,
yeah.
okay?
And it says, lower portion of the watershed, if proven to be more problematic. And I would strike proven to be, and I would put in the documentation demonstrates it is.
If it is demonstrated to be more problematic,
Yeah, that part's okay, but I would just take out the proven because you're not really, it's not a proof.
all right,
And technically and legally, it's probably not a great term. And that same thing happens on page 2 in item G2. I can read that back to you.
Hey, are you talking about changing proven to demonstrated?
Yeah, it says, take out proven to be, okay? And put in, if the documentation demonstrates it is more problematic than being. Forgive me for being so picky, but a lot of my career was writing procedures and having them reviewed by federal inspectors, so I've kind of,
We appreciate your assistance.
I kind of look at stuff like that. And again, on page 2, item G2, you kind of got the same situation. About
If it can
halfway,
be demonstrated.
yeah, just put if the documentation demonstrates, or however you want to word it. I just think that's a little better wording. Other than that, I think it's well-written, and it's a great idea. In fact, I'm kind of confused as why this hasn't come up before, because it seems like a great benefit to the developers. So I'm really curious why this hasn't come before the planning commission years ago, actually.
It did come up several years ago, and the planning commission allowed it on a very small piece of property that really would not be that noticeable from their peak discharge anyway. It was over here at the LCUB office on Campbell Station Road. So it has been looked at in the past, but that's the only time in the last 26 years that I know of.
Anyway, thank you very much. It's a great procedure, great idea too, thank you.
Mark, do you have the wording? proper?
Well, I was gonna run that by you. On G2, typically this might occur in the very lowest downstream reaches of a major watershed if the documentation demonstrates that undetained stormwater. Okay. All right, thank you.
I mean, you can, what was the proven?
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Okay, thank you.
All right, we need amendment to the motion.
I'll make a motion to amend.
Second.
Okay. Mayor Williams made the motion to amend, and Commissioner Green seconded it. Any other questions or comments about this issue? Okay. If not, all in favor of the motion, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Are we voting on the computer or not?
Yes.
It's not showing up on
It's
mine.
not showing up.
Not everyone's showing up, so,
You okay with verbal?
yeah.
Okay. So it was
You want me to
unanimous?
call a roll, or
No, just tell me that
I got everyone as yes?
it was
Yes.
unanimous.
Motion is
Thank
yes.
you. All right. Next item is 4B, discussion and approval of a preliminary plan for the North Watt Road roundabout at 301 North Watt Road.
I'm sorry, yes, this is a project that has been on our books for a couple of years. It is the construction of a roundabout at the southern entrance to Mayor Bob Leonard Park. The idea is that it will slow traffic and create a safer entrance to the park. And, well, staff recommends approval of the preliminary plans. We do have Seth Bradley with us tonight. He is from Thompson Engineering. He is the designer, and he can answer any of the questions you have. So I'll turn it over to him.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, Mayor Williams has made the motion, and Commissioner Green has made the second. Before we get to you, have there been any citizens signed up, Mark?
No, sir, not for this item.
Go ahead. You got something you want to add to what's been said so far? You got to hit the button there.
I'll push the
There you
button.
go.
Well, good evening. Yeah, just introducing myself. I'm Seth with Thompson Engineering, and here to answer any questions if they've come up about the project as far as the design aspect.
We need your name and address.
My name is Seth Bradley, and I live in 1947 Lenox Hills in Cleveland, Tennessee.
Okay. We got any questions from the commissioners or comments?
I have
Go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
I have a comment. Let's see, how do I want to phrase this? I think the other roundabouts that we have in town are on 2-lane roads, okay? And this is on a 3-lane road. North of that proposed roundabout is a crosswalk, and it's been run over, what, 2 or 3 times? So I'm curious about how we make the transition from 3 lanes onto the 2-lane roundabout. You have any comments on that?
Yeah, so basically that transition will happen in the island. So, yeah, as you can see, if you go back to that detail sheet, that one right there, it's kind of it's about as natural transition that you can make. So it's kind of hard to say without a laser, but the center line runs east to west of the sheet you see there that goes directly through the roundabout. And you see that there's concrete islands on the left and right side of that sheet. And so the striping will change to a gore area striping as it transitions into the concrete island, and that curve helps slow traffic to maneuver into it. So, yes, sir, it's concrete. Yeah, and it's a.
Is there typically some, I guess you have warning signs, I guess you would have warning signs as you approach that area?
Yes, sir, yeah, we.
That you're gonna not, because sometimes the traffic gets backed up. Well, it won't get backed up, I guess, if there's a roundabout there. I was gonna say, sometimes the traffic gets backed up and both lanes are in use, coming down the hill. So I was curious that we wanna try to warn drivers, I guess, that they can't use that center lane.
As far as the MUTCD goes, which is the main manual that the FHWA uses for signing, all the correct signing will be placed on there as warning and notification of the roundabout. I can't say specifically, that's something I'd have to look a little further into to notify that there's an ending to that turn lane. And I see what you're saying, because that does go through that, where the roundabout currently is. And so I'd have to follow up on if there's anything that the MUTCD does recommend for any kind of ending of a turn lane. Since there's no other uses of that turn lane in vicinity of the park entrance there, I'll have to double check that.
I guess my only comment is based on what happened up the road on the crosswalk, where it got, people went right through the middle of the island, wiped out the instrumentation, everything else. That, I guess it would be advisable to have clear markings somehow that drivers can see, either along the curb, reflective tape or something like that. And I don't know if that's standard or not, but because of the history, it might be a good idea. That's my comment for what it's worth. Thank you.
Oh,
The truck traffic that we deal with on Watt Road, which is, part of it is to bypass the scales, and then part of it is legitimate local truck traffic. I really think we do need to take into account the design. I think the radius is a great thing. We've got a large radius on it, which should allow a tractor trailer, let's say with a 53-foot trailer, get through there. But I would hate to see a lot of taxpayer dollars spent on elaborate landscaping, because it's going to get driven through. And so I think there's other areas of the town we've done a great job with landscaping, and most of the time it is respected by the drivers. They don't drive through it. So I know we're kind of in the preliminary design or conceptual design phase right here, but I would encourage you to not go overboard. I don't know exactly what the scope of work that you guys are charged with, but just think about tractor trailers driving through there quite a bit that are going to be not staying on the asphalt. They're going to be getting up on the shoulders of that island, I think often, hourly. So.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate what you're saying, in the proposal for our scope of work was to design it for a WB67, which is even a longer vehicle than what you were referencing. And that there's a concrete apron, which is a truck apron on the inside, and that's what's to facilitate the large trucks. Okay. As far as our scope, we don't have any landscaping being proposed in the island like you were talking about, because there is many instances where that happens, where people drive through the center of the island, but no hard structures. That's normally advised against in most designs.
Derek?
I may have missed this part of the plan, but How long is the construction on this, and then how do we facilitate traffic on Watt Road during the project? One lane continues to stay open right there, rerouted. I'm sure we'll have a plan for rerouting, but how long does this one take, and when will this start and finish?
I don't have a complete date on construction timeline. As far as the traffic control, that's a part of our scope, that's part of the main package. And so the traffic control is something that we've extensively looked at, especially with the limited amount of space and building a roundabout right there. And not real major detour, really close detours. We want to impact the local traffic as minimal as possible. And so that's typically done on roads like this with temporary signals, and it's phased construction. So you'd build to one side, shift, and then reverse, just in typical roadway. But to answer your question on construction timeline, I'm not certain. I can't give you a solid time on how long it would take.
I've got a question. You mentioned the apron. If you put that picture back up, the apron, you said, how high is that from the road surface? Is that just an inch or two so that trucks will get over that part, right?
So yes, sir. So there's a peak to the center of the island, and those truck aprons slope back towards the roadway for drainage purposes.
Right.
But the curb that runs around that apron is a mountable curb, and it is a 2-inch offset, and it's tapered. So it's a pretty smooth transition. So it's a very easily passable. That's how most roundabouts are able to process fire trucks and school buses and things like that. And this one's specifically designed for a much larger vehicle.
How about the center circle? How high is that? Are you familiar with the Virtue Road?
No, sir, I'm not.
roundabout? Okay. What?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I just wonder how high that center median area is, right?
Of the grassed area in the center, I don't know the exact distance of right this minute without the profile sheets, but it's a very minimal, it's not very raised and high, 2 feet, 3 feet or anything like that. You have a 2 foot or a 2-inch to get up into the apron that slopes at, I believe, 1.5% to 2%. So you're talking maybe 12 inches from the travel way elevation to the center of the grassed area, which is sloped up so that everything drains away into the storm network.
Okay, just to go a little bit what Ron just said. So there's not an obstruction or a curb or anything in the middle? So if somebody just wants to drive through the middle of the roundabout, they can do that?
There's a raised curb on the inside where.
You're talking about the 2-inch curb?
No, sir.
Okay, there's another one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So there's a curb on the inside of the island that will differentiate between the concrete apron, which is not a typically driven on surface. It's not asphalt. That's just for trucks to be able to travel through. But there is a hard curb that separates the grass center line from the truck apron.
Is it a raised curb?
Yes, sir.
And how many inches do we think that the
Those
design
curbs
is?
are 6 inches.
Okay, so I mean, that's substantial enough that someone at least feels like they're gonna do some damage to their vehicle if they purposely just drive through the middle of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's definitely, yeah. No.
Okay, no, that's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanna make sure it wasn't flush.
Yeah, no,
That's
sir.
kind of what was my understanding earlier.
I agree. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Derek.
Thinking along those lines, and I definitely agree with what you're saying, with all the traffic and the trucks. Some of the roundabouts in town, I think of McPhee, there's enough sidewalk area that's inviting to park your bike on for just a minute to stand, rest, whatever. Will this have that, or we want to keep people off of this? I don't think we want people with all these cars and trucks going through, drivers driving through this roundabout potentially. We don't want people parked there, standing there. Is that do we consider that? Is that something you all consider to raise it high enough, whether it's 6 inches or higher, to not invite people to come up on this roundabout and use it as a resting place, just out of safety?
So typically, the FHWA is the one that kind of helps the states really come up, the roundabouts being somewhat new, there's not super extensive hard design guidelines until more recently from FHWA and from TDOT. And so it is intended and designed to not be inviting. There are certain instances, that's why you have to be selective on where you place them, to not invite people to want to hang out.
Right.
This location is kind of a perfect scenario with the room that you have. And that you don't have lots of crosswalks, massive sideways, storefronts, where people are running across the street or anything like that. And so just from a design aspect, this is kind of the best case scenario, and that you will not be inviting people to hang out.
Any other comments or questions? All right, if not, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed?
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, we're now into the two discussion items. I hit it. We're now into the two discussion items. Item 5A is a discussion on updating the requirements of customary home occupations as provided for in the Farragut Code of Ordinances. Appendix A is zoning, Chapter 4, Section 6, customary home occupations. Yeah, this is discussion only.
Yeah, yes, sir. I'm Bart Hose. I'm the Assistant Community Development Director. This is something that you've all looked at before, but this is a new version of it. We've been working on it since, I guess, late in 2024. We had a draft ordinance that came before you all in August of '25. And then it was forwarded on to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for adoption. The regulatory approach that we took in that initial proposed set of amendments was to come up with like a two-tier approach to where we had very simple home occupations that wouldn't require a permit. And then, the more complicated ones, the ones that had the potential to have more impact would require an impact. And we also had some differential standards depending on the type of use that, was contemplated. During the adoption process for that, the town was made aware of a court case out of Middle Tennessee that dealt with home occupation and equal protection issues. So the town attorney looked at that case. It took him a while to go through that case. And also our regulations. The case is still under appeal, but the town attorney felt, that the best course of action at this point would be to eliminate the two-tier system, and also, if possible, to just apply one single set of requirements to all home occupations. So we've been working on that since we met with him on that, and he got us that input. And we've come up with what we're providing you tonight to think about and look at and get some comment back on. The draft language would eliminate the two-tier approach that we had, and it would just provide a single set of requirements for all home occupations. It still maintains the goal of having a wider range of businesses. In fact, any business that could meet the performance standards could be permitted as a home occupation. So under the preceding one, we broadened it quite a bit, from what it is today in the existing regulations. But here it's pretty much, if a business can meet the performance criteria that are in here, the conditions, that are being placed upon it, they could get a permit for a home occupation. So, we're still trying to maintain our main objectives in doing this is to protect the residential character of residentially zoned properties and neighborhoods, to clarify the existing regulations and to supplement them where necessary to deal with the fact that we're allowing a much larger range of uses or potentially allowing a larger range of uses, as home occupations. And then to focus more on regulating the impact of the home occupations as opposed to the particular type of use. So, we don't care if it's an office or someone cutting hair. It just comes down to whether or not they meet the performance criteria. In your packet, you had a copy of the regulations or at least the draft language for the regulations. It's not an ordinance form because this is just a workshop and we really want to get some input on this. And also a comparison table that we put together so that you could compare the existing standards to the new standards. So you can have a sense of what's changing, what's being clarified, what's being dropped or added to. And hope that was helpful for you. One issue that still is out, or one of the largest issues that, still out there and that needs input on is vehicles. That was a big issue in the last regulations, and it continues to be something that, that we are looking to get input from, from the town and from the larger community on. In this draft, after talking about it at the town staff level, we thought it was at least worth considering moving it out of the home occupation regulations and putting it into property maintenance. That way, it would just apply to all residential properties, regardless of whether you had a home occupation or not. A lot of, well, not a lot, but other communities we found would regulate the parking of commercial vehicles on residential lots, either elsewhere in the zoning ordinance or elsewhere in the municipal code, separate and apart from the home occupation issue. So, we thought that it was at least worth considering that approach, and, so we put the language together here, to at least, think about doing it that way. The town attorney has gone through, this draft. He's fairly comfortable with the language the way it is now. He had some editorial suggestions that we'll probably make along the way. One of which was to, maybe redo the intent section of what the regulations would be. But that'll depend in part on, what the actual outcome is on the final language. So, that's something that we'll be working on with him, depending on the input we get back from the Planning Commission and from any other public meetings we might have on this. Again, I've got some slides on the vehicle issue. I don't know if you have any comments on any of the other language, or if you have any questions on any of the other, language, or if you want to wait to the end and at least kind of look at the vehicle aspect of it.
I think we'll wait till we get our citizen input.
Okay,
And then
perfect.
we can talk about the commissioner, so.
So in the regulations right now, or in the draft language, we would define a commercial vehicle. It would go in the property maintenance code where we deal with vehicles and RVs and that sort of thing now. So we have a rough definition. The only really provisions we put on it is total length, which would be 27 feet, and where the longer vehicles are parked on a piece of property. In the preceding draft, we did address type of vehicle, and that's something that we need to discuss. So, commercial vehicles come in a lot of different types. You have, vans, cargo vans, step vans, sprinter vans. They all come in different sizes and configurations. People sometimes use their own SUV or their own pickup truck for a commercial vehicle. So there's a range of types of vehicle and size of vehicle. That's one of the things that, we do want to consider is, whether or not we need to consider just pure size, or whether we need to consider, the type of vehicle too, that people in Farragut would, expect to see in their residential neighborhoods, and what they feel comfortable seeing in their residential neighborhoods on a regular basis. Also, there are considerations about the use. If somebody was just parking a vehicle that they had for another employer versus a home occupation, in terms of the frequency of use, business vehicles get used often. That's their purpose. Hours of operation and that sort of thing. But really right now, we used the standard sort of that we were using in the past iteration of this ordinance, but dropped type of vehicle and just stuck to the size of the vehicle. Also simplified it a bit to where if the vehicle was smaller, like if you were using a typical passenger car for a commercial vehicle, a typical size van, a pickup truck, that sort of thing, under 22 feet long, and no more than 8 feet high, we would treat that like any other vehicle, and you could actually park that in your driveway and wouldn't have to put it behind the front plane of the house. So, this is just a slide that just shows the range of different type of commercial vehicle. Here's some others that, That's like a cargo van up there at the top of FedEx. The food truck there is sort of a modified, it looks like a Sprinter van. The big yellow truck is a step van, and then you have a pickup truck, which is a simple cab on the back, and then you have a pickup class type vehicle, a larger pickup type class vehicle with, boxes and stuff on the end. And then in terms of size, we took some pictures around that. We measured that just with a tape measure. It's, 27 to 28 feet long, so something that size could potentially be parked on a residential lot if it was just 27 or if it was, 26. Something that large would have to go behind the front plane of the home. The next one that's about a 22-foot-long box-type truck. That's one of our little town SUVs parked next to it to give you some perspective on the size. That's a 26 to 27-foot length. Again, we were just measuring this with, a tape measure in the parking lots where we found them. That's a 35, so that would not be allowed currently, or the way we have it written. So that would be over 27. That wouldn't be allowed anywhere on the lot. But that's a big vehicle. So next one, that's a 20-foot-long dump truck. So conceivably you could park that on a residential lot. I don't know whether or not the community feels comfortable with that in residential neighborhoods. It's a 23-foot-long bucket truck on a Ford F-50 class truck. And that's just a 14-foot enclosed box length food type trailer. So, trailers are also used for commercial purposes, so.
Can I interrupt you here? Some of those larger vehicles that look like they probably don't belong there, they really wouldn't be associated with a home occupation though, would they?
Well, I mean, if we're allowing almost any type of home occupation, any business to be a home occupation, if you meet the performance standards, then, somebody could have a contractor's, business and, could keep some of their equipment there.
That could possibly be a individual that his job was to deliver refrigerators.
Yeah.
And that was the vehicle that he would use to do that. He may load the whole thing up in the morning and spend the whole day delivering refrigerators. So that possibly.
Or food trucks have been like a discussion point from the beginning in these regulations. Some of the food trucks get really large. They're in large step vans. So. Some of the Sprinter vans and the extended cargo type vans, a lot of people that are, like dog groomers or, pet groomers and they have a mobile business, they might keep it there and then go out, to your house and groom your pet. But, they're fairly large vehicles.
Is there a consideration for tonnage?
That's not something we've addressed. We wanted to get input, again, as to, what the feeling is to, what size and type of vehicle is something the community feels comfortable having regularly and parked on residential lots in residential neighborhoods in town. If the community wants to restrict that, to a certain level, then we might have to look at better ways to define that. But then, at this point, we just put in this language basically for y'all to chew on and get some input back on.
I'm of the opinion we probably could go around on this subject for a couple hours tonight and still not have a resolution. And I think you've done a pretty good job of trying to sort that out. But when I saw the heavy-duty dump truck, the tonnage idea because I really don't think that belongs in somebody's driveway on a regular basis. So maybe you might want to consider a tonnage limit as well, and that might rule out some of the longer vehicles as well. So that's something to consider. But I recognize this is an issue trying to define what's okay and what's not.
Yeah, and some communities do use that. They use tonnage or they use like gross vehicle weight type things. But you know, they're all over the map, you know, and again, it comes down to an individual community's, you know, decision as to, you know, what they feel is customary and appropriate in their neighborhoods, in their residentially zoned property. And in this case, you know, we are talking about in residentially zoned property. You know, these regulations, whether it's in the home occupation regulations or it's in the property maintenance, it would only apply to, you know, residentially zoned lots you know, it wouldn't affect a commercial zone or commercial property.
Is it possible to consider a waiver process so that if issue came up that they could apply for a waiver?
We could, I suppose, build that in. You know, we were trying to keep it more as a simpler sort of conditional, you know, use by right type issue as opposed to, you know, going through any sort of, you know, special, you know, review, whether it's a special exception or a use on review type process. You know, but we could look at that.
I don't know. I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm just trying to find ways that this is so broad that there's bound to be contested cases. And if there is, maybe there needs to be a way to resolve that rather than just purely trying to define it in a 2-page procedure or 3-page procedure.
Well, I mean, you know, built into the zoning, if on the home occupation side, I'd have to go back and look at the property maintenance side. If we put it in the property maintenance side, I'm not exactly sure what the appeals process is on that. But in most of our regulations, if an administrative decision is made and there's, you know, like a permit denied, you know, there's usually a process to where you can go. And in the zoning case, it's on to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Have you got anything else you want to add before we call on the citizens? All right, let's do that. Anybody signed up?
Yeah, I have two that have signed up. The first one is Brian Walker.
Let me make one point. If you look at the property maintenance right now, I think if I remember correctly, there is a situation there where it's past the frontage of the house, and it applies mainly to motorhomes. And I think this larger vehicle would probably fall into the same criteria.
Yeah, and we have it, you know, that way. Now is the larger ones would have to fall behind. But again, there's a difference, I think, between, you know, like a motorhome or an RV and a large commercial vehicle in terms of, you know, its usage, you know, the way it's used. And
Yeah, motorhome's typically not for a home-based occupation. It's for personal use. Anyway, just a point of record.
Sure.
Stand by. We'll be calling you.
All right, very good. Yeah, Brian Walker, 408 East Kingsgate. Wanted to bring this, because I was on the committee. I was on this whole thing for the ad hoc committee. And a lot of people ask me on the streets, emails, phone calls, and everything else about what happened. So I wanted to basically give it out there, my version of what was involved with this and my opinion about what's going on. So we started off with a lot of people. And unfortunately, by the end, or actually after the first meeting, everybody left except for Alderman Kane and Don Mann back here. There were only three of us that were on this committee that were actually participating in it. And that was unfortunate, but I want to note too that the last meeting we had was June of 2025. Okay, so June last year. And I reviewed my notes from each meeting, and the trend that we had from the committee was every objection, every suggestion we had was basically omitted or overlooked as we brought it in. We had questions, we had concerns about what was being shown. And I just want to bring attention to a comment that was on Nextdoor. And she's not here. This is from Louise Povlin, Commissioner Povlin. But from her perspective, the ad hoc committee process broke down. And I want to say that the process didn't break down because the citizens involved with the process and the ad hoc committee did their job fighting back and pushing back on what was being pushed on by the town. So we gave our opinions. And we debated, we argued. Every meeting had the same point, same regulations were brought up by the employee. And this is where we're at. I wish the original members had continued to keep coming. I wish more citizen input would have been allowed for people that wanted to speak, to be on the committee, were able to come to the committee meetings. But at no time did we ever have a vote on what you're seeing now or what you saw before. Because remember, this came to Planning Commission before, came to BOMA, went back to Tom Hale, and then now we're back here. And we've never had a meeting since June of last year together. So whenever you hear the word "we decided this" or "we as a committee brought this up," it wasn't a "we" thing. That was all it was. And, let's see, I'm so surprised on that one. Now, my issue with a few of these things, where a lot of this stuff is, especially, we'll talk about the vehicles, 'cause that was one thing brought up. Private citizens can do this. And sure, they can have a refrigerator company and they can drive their trucks. They leave in the morning, they come back at night. You can have an RV, yeah, sure, the RV is not gonna be pulled out every single weekend maybe, or every single day, but they're still allowed. But a person trying to make an income can't do it on their own. They can't do it. Now, I look at a lot of the communities in and around the town of Farragut. They have HOAs. This should be more of an HOA issue and not a town of Farragut issue, and lean on whatever rules and regulations they have. It's my estimation that there was actually 3 total complaints the town of Farragut got as far as businesses go. And what's happening is those are neighbors complaining on other neighbors, and that's it. In this document, as far as I'm concerned, or what I can find, there's no enforcement rules. There's no report about who actually is going to enforce this. There's no way other than one neighbor complaining to another neighbor. Because we don't have the manpower to have vehicles circling all the parking lots and all the communities around the town to say, hey, this is the problem, we need to fight. So that's my thing. It needs to go back to the committee. We need to look at it. We need to have more people, more citizens on the committee, and then more interested people looking at this before it's brought before this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, who's next?
Next is Greg Bartley.
Evening, gentlemen. How are you tonight? I don't have many comments. I just have some questions that some of my fellow community members have asked me to present to both the Planning Commission and the commission working on this. So the first question is how are existing businesses going to be grandfathered in with any change of regulations? How the ordinance would apply to anyone living in an apartment such as Biddle Farms, if that's going to be allowed. If a house does not have approved surface to park a commercial vehicle on or the ability to install one on either the side yard or the rear yard, will they be unable to they would be unable to have such a vehicle at their residence and would automatically be disqualified from this ordinance. And the final one, which they would just went at length with, was the length of vehicles, the type of vehicles. If somebody has a 40-foot RV in their yard and somebody has a 20-foot commercial vehicle, is that fair? Or should they balance out 40 and 40? Again, that's something that's already been covered and should be discussed. Thank you, unless you got any comments.
Don't run off. I wrote as quick as I could, so bear with me, okay? Okay, first thing was on
grandfathering.
okay. Wait a minute. Okay,
And the second thing was how it would apply to someone living in an apartment and wanting to run a home occupation.
okay, I thought second was existing business.
Pardon?
Existing business, was that on there, or did I?
Yes,
Okay,
that's,
okay,
the existing business was part of the
okay,
grandfathering.
okay. Apartments, number two,
Yep.
okay. Then side yard parking,
And then, if somebody's lot is either too small, they don't have a setback, whatever, how would you accommodate somebody that has a no home occupation that can't meet the criteria?
okay, and
And the last was, again, the type and size of vehicles, how it should balance out between both a residential RV and a commercial vehicle. That's a tough one to try to micromanage that distinction.
okay, Mark, you got all that as well? Okay, okay, thank you, Greg.
That's all I have that signed up for this one.
All right, let's hear from the commissioners. Who wants to start? Who's got any questions or comments?
I'll start.
Okay.
Bart, I got a question for you. So we got we got an email forwarded to us from a citizen today. And I thought they brought up a good point about accessory buildings. Can you just walk me through why they're not permitted now, why they won't be permitted in this new ordinance? And ultimately, do we regulate accessory buildings at all currently, like RVs? Like RVs.
Well, the RV wouldn't be an accessory building.
Well, I know it's not, but we regulate those.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right, that's my point.
Yeah, so in the existing ordinance, it's been in place, long before I worked for the town, so I'm not, I can't
Sure.
speak as to why, why it's in there now. We discussed, at one of the planning commission meetings on the accessory use as to whether or not, or, the accessory building, as to whether you wanted to, allow them to extend some aspects of the home occupation in, and that was rejected at the time. So, we could revisit that issue for sure as to whether or not you wanted the conduct of, the full conduct, or maybe aspects of it like storage.
Well, are they regulated currently in size and storage?
Yeah, they are,
Yeah.
and that is one of the concerns, is that, currently we allow accessory buildings.
Right.
And they can be 5 foot from a property line. So, that would potentially put, the home occupation right up next to an adjoining property owner. So, I think, the last time we discussed it, the planning commission felt that, there was no reason to extend that into it. I think, the idea was, the person who's running the home occupation can live with it in their house and not necessarily, put it in an accessory structure and over closer to a neighbor. But, it's certainly, something we could revisit and, allow some aspects, like maybe storage, maybe allow it if the accessory structure has a greater setback, is another option that could be looked at, so that, to get it away from the neighbor's property. So we left it out because that's the input we got in the past on that.
Yeah, I think my input would be, we've talked about this now for a long time, and it just feels like if we already have regulations in place that could be applicable to this scenario, why not just lean into those that are already in place? Same thing goes for RVs. Like, if already there's an RV regulation that requires it to be behind the front facing of the building, seems common sense for same-size commercial vehicles to be given the same regulation. I would also say that accessory buildings, same thing. If they're already regulated in size and use and location, what's really the big deal if somebody stores some stuff for their home business in the same looking sized
Well,
building?
would you want to restrict it to storage alone, or would you want them to be able to, operate the entire business out of the accessory structure, which could put, noise and.
Yeah, I would think
and-
storage
and-
only, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Get it.
yeah, we can certainly
Okay.
do that.
Yeah, again, I'm just looking for more information, so.
Yeah.
That's all I got, thanks.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is the town attorney has opined on some case law, and the existing ordinance that we have that delineates, or maybe for a better word, discriminates with two different types of home occupation uses needs to be changed. So I think doing nothing is not an acceptable solution. And I'm not sure that's what Jeff was saying, just do nothing. But I do think that we need to address our home occupation ordinance, quite frankly, so we can defend it in the future. Because there's some holes in it right now that we might have some trouble defending. Is that a fair statement, Bart?
Well, the existing ordinance is not currently two-tiered. That was the last proposal. The existing ordinance is in some ways similar to what we have now. It's just, it's got a much more discrete set of businesses that can qualify as a home occupation without going to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Some of the standards are similar, but are less defined, or are more absolute. And so, we were trying to again, sort of broaden the number of uses that could be considered for a home occupation permit, and then, clarify some of our existing standards, and then also deal with the fact that if you would do allow a broader set of businesses to potentially be permitted as a home occupation in a residential area, that, by itself could create additional impacts that then you want to make sure that you're going to control, so the approach we took is really all about performance, and it's under the idea of, if someone's conducting the business in the house and no one knows it, if you're not changing the residential character of that lot, if you're not changing, the activities that are, occurring in a way that's impacting the neighbors and what they expect in terms of living in a residential neighborhood, then it doesn't really matter, But as soon as you start having activities that are spilling off of your, out of your house, off of your property, that are impacting your neighbors, that are taking away from, the residential area that they bought into and that they want, to live in, that's where, we have to start, having some standards in place to limit that.
From my memory, and it seems like we've been working on this a long time, a couple of years at least, the issues or the complaints really have been more focused around the trucks more than, somebody having a cabinet shop in their garage. It's been more focused about the parking, employee parking, and then the trucks. And I remember there was somebody that was concerned about somebody running the generator all night or starting the generator at 6 a.m. on their food truck or something. I'm wondering if maybe that's where we should try to focus for a period of time in the separate, I think, what do we have it in, you were proposing it in the kind of more property maintenance than trying to put it into home occupation?
That would just be on the vehicle component.
On the vehicle, but
yeah.
Has that primarily been the source of complaints, has to do with the vehicles?
It has been a big source of complaint, but not the only. And honestly, there are some people that don't think there should be any businesses, conducted in their neighborhoods, which, probably isn't unrealistic. There's, probably always been people, conducting some level of business out of their house, or not. Or some percentage of people have probably done that for years and years and years. But and a lot of the home occupations that we do have in town are, they're fairly small scale. They're things that, they don't have
Like somebody that
customers coming on.
They cut hair or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
They don't really impact the happiness of their neighbor.
Yep, yep. A lot of office-based things, a lot of consultants, and that type of activity. They do a lot of work online. There is some sales. There's some computer or online sales, but some of them use like drop shipping,
Like fulfillment centers.
Yeah.
And so they're not dealing with trucks coming and going.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Bart, I have one more question. I'm sure that you researched some other municipalities and what they have. Is this a common procedure that you find in municipalities? Most municipalities have a procedure such as this to control home occupations in residential areas.
Yeah, most zoning ordinances, address home occupations in residential areas, and but they do it in a pretty wide range. In fact, the tier system came from another Tennessee municipality. I imagine if that court case continues and the local government in Middle Tennessee loses, there'll be several other towns in the state that'll have to amend their ordinance because, that won't be allowed in the state. But I think it's because for years, it's been acknowledged that, there's some amount of business activity that people are doing in their home. Just, small scale stuff, secondary type employment, maybe a hobbyist that, sells a little bit on the side or, goes to farmers markets and that type of thing, or, someone that cuts hair, and I know of at least one in town here where they do. And so I think most zoning ordinances, if you look at them, have some provision for home occupation. But the way they deal with them oftentimes varies, depending on, what the community feels is appropriate in their community.
So one thing, John, if we don't specifically provide for it, like we have always done in the town and most communities, it's not an allowed use. Because it has to be listed as something that's permitted use. This has conditions, and really everybody has conditions to some extent. You have setbacks, you have lot coverage, you have height, all those things are really conditions. But if we didn't say customary home occupations are a permitted use, and it technically wouldn't be allowed anywhere. So that's one thing I think we need to point out. That makes it a use by right if you can meet the performance standards that are in the zoning ordinance.
I think I'm confused, I guess, because the primary purpose of a residential neighborhood is residence, you know what I mean? And we're trying to allow some uses in there that does not overstep that residential quality. So, there could be 1,000 different combinations and proposals to you for these businesses. So I get it that there's gonna be some restrictions that some people might not like, but I think to preserve the quality of residential neighborhoods, some of the residences in this town are absolutely gorgeous, and I'm pretty sure they don't want a gigantic dump truck parked in the guy's next door driveway. So I guess it's an individual municipality judgment, and I think you guys have done a reasonable job here. It looks like it needs a little bit of tuning yet, but I think you've done a reasonable job of trying to walk that line between the residential priority and still allow some businesses to operate that aren't disturbing the neighbors. And it's hard to define that in a 2 or 3 page procedure, but I think you've made a pretty good cut at it. I hope our comments have been helpful for you.
Vice Mayor Meyer, do you have any comments?
I was just going to ask, what was the rationale for monitoring parcel delivery services?
That was, we got thinking about the wider range of businesses, that potentially could come in and the type of things they may want to have delivered to their homes. And, we had at least one instance recently where a neighbor was complaining because the person running a business, was having things delivered by an 18-wheeler. So.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's something, these performance standards, outside of the vehicle matter, we would like for y'all to weigh in on those a little bit. And I think that's a good point. It is hard to regulate how many deliveries somebody gets, especially nowadays when you have Amazon and all these other that are really may or may not be.
You should truly see my house.
Well, I can
$2
imagine.
in my lot, like it's,
Yeah, I know.
it looks like we're running occupation out of our house.
Yeah.
And we're not.
So I don't know that's a good point. Is that something we even need to really get involved with? I mean, I don't know. I think it's one of those things. That's why this is just a discussion for anybody to bring up comments, and I think that's a good one. I've got a little bit of concern about that myself.
Commissioner Wright, do you have any? Okay, I've got a few. I've talked to several citizens and have a couple of questions that they've asked me. What is the on-site inspection? Is there going to be an on-site inspection prior to permit approval? Someone wants a permit, you're going to go out and on-site and look at it, or you're just going to take their word for it? How does that work? What's the process?
That's not something we do now. Typically, what we do is we have an application they have to fill out. They have to, check off all the requirements, that they're going to be meeting all these requirements. If we have questions about them, sometimes we ask them to provide additional documentation or, further clarify what they're going to be doing. And, so typically.
But you won't be visiting the residents?
Typically not. Now, if you're gonna allow larger vehicles and they're gonna be, having to construct, additional driveway area to put it on, that's something we'd be looking at anyway when they're, we're doing that kind of paving work and stuff, so. But,
Okay, go Well, that's a question a couple people have
And,
asked me.
and that's something that came up in the last one, that, you know, the standards as they're written today in your current ordinance, and what a lot of towns do is, you know, they restrict it to a certain percentage of the home, you know, no more than 20%, no more than 25% of the home. And people working, you know, I brought that up in the last one, is, are you gonna come in and inspect? But we dropped that, that's not in the regulations
been
anymore.
dropped.
Yep.
All right, is there a process to visit the site after reports of alleged non-compliance? And who's gonna police that? Who are we gonna?
We would treat that like we deal with violations to, you know, multiple codes now. If neighbors made complaints, we'd, you know, ask them to document for us. We'd go out and try to document what was going on as well, you know, whether it be a property maintenance issue or zoning violation or whatnot now. So it would run through the same process. You know, depending on where we put the vehicles, whether it be in the home occupation or elsewhere in the zoning ordinance, or if we put it in the property maintenance, you know, it would then fall within that section of the code, and we'd enforce it the same. And within the zoning code, you know, you know, for the home occupation aspect of it, it would be enforced the same as any other aspect of the zoning ordinance would be.
Okay, in the draft on page 2, this would be A10. No equipment or process shall, let me get my glasses, shall regularly be used in connection with a home occupation that creates recurring noise, vibration, glare, fumes, odors, electrical interference that is detectable to the normal senses off of the lot and creates a disturbance to a neighboring property owner. How are we going to measure these things? That's,
I'm sorry. You know, the normal senses would be, you know, standard human senses. Maybe we need to say normal human senses, but if a neighbor's complaining about, you know, noise from a home occupation all the time, and, you know, we'd go out and stand on their property, and if we could hear it or, you know, perceive that impact, then that would be an issue.
okay, let's see, there was one other. I'm sorry, let me start over. A2, the physical location, address of a home occupation shall not be used as a staging location for off-site employees or work crews. We've seen that, I have personally seen that in a couple of different residential areas, and a bunch of trucks show up in the morning, decide where they're going, what's going on, ties up the road. You know, there's not supposed to be any parking on the road, and sometimes there's 5, 6, 7 cars. So that's a concern that has been brought to my attention, and I've seen it myself. So, again, I'm glad to see that in there. Policing that is going to be difficult because it's not on a regular basis.
Well, you know, the neighbors can take pictures and, you know, for us too, and document, and if they're willing to, you know, if we get documentation and we end up, you know, having to cite someone to municipal court, then, you know, they can come and testify to that and provide that documentation to the city judge. So, you know, and we might, you know, be asked to go out there and at various times and try to document it as well. And you know, it's the case with a lot of things that we have to regulate in zoning or in the property maintenance code. It oftentimes, you know, takes us a while to, you know, to find out exactly what's going on and to document it enough to take action.
All right, thank you. Mayor, you're up.
Okay. Jeff touched on something that I think is relevant, and that a lot of us who live in subdivision that has HOA regulations. I was president of HOA for a number of years, and we dealt with a lot of the same things, and a lot of that had to do with what your regs were to begin with, and what you signed whenever you purchased your house that was on, that you would apply, actually abide by whatever the regulations are that's in the HOA rules. So a lot of times that catches some of the stuff that is out of whack, but some of the things with the buildings, you know, the 5 feet thing, most of those were where people just stored lawnmowers and things of that nature. So when you say a different building sitting back there, whether it be a lawnmower being stored there, or if it's some books or whatever that somebody's got stored there, then it's pretty much the same. And unless you happen to be the neighbor next door or whatever, you'd never even know that that's going on. So I think that's one of the things. And the other is whenever you look at the list of things that are currently allowed, like what Mark was saying, if it's a residential area, so you have things that are allowed and things that are not allowed, and so a lot of what we have here was more or less based off of the fact that we've got quite a few subdivisions that have no HOA. So when you look at McKingsgate and Thornton Heights and Stonecrest and Lent Heights, some of those that do not have HOAs, then this is something that helps protect them in a sense. So I think that was where the basis originally, because we didn't always have what we've got now. I mean, we've got close to 90 subdivisions now, and part of them have HOAs, part of them don't. But when you look at that and you kind of go over that and you say you're going to do it on a performance criteria, then again, you look at application, and if it's a residential zoning district, then it's basically for housing. But you do have, in our case, in Sherwood, we just curiosity, we ask around to all the people that paid their dues, how many people had home businesses? Well, we had 21% of the people in our neighborhood that had home businesses. And it varied. I mean, it could be a salesman, it could be, it could be most anything. Like you said, somebody cutting hair. We had a lot of insurance people that worked out of their home, and which that's a common deal. So there was a lot of things that fall into that home-based business that, most of the time, if somebody don't come down and ask for a permit, you never really knew that they were even going on there. So, and one other thing is basically the meeting that the ad hoc, whenever this come up, originally in the Planning Commission meeting, we had a brand new alderman, okay? And he was assigned as the alderman to be part of the ad hoc committee. Now, I've not heard from him tonight, but I have to assume that Mr. Walker is the one that's speaking for him as well. If not, then I'd like to hear from the alderman, and number one. And number two, I think Mr. Mann was also one of the one that was on the ad hoc committee, and we've not heard from Mr. Mann. So, and is there somebody else that was part of the committee? I don't think so. So if that would be possible, if the Planning Commission would want to entertain that, I'd like to hear from both of those.
Where do we go? It's up to us? Well, I'd like to hear from Mr. Kane.
Mr. Kane, you come on up, and then Mr. Mann, if you don't mind, follow him. We'd sure appreciate it. Yeah, 3 minutes, just like what everybody else had.
Good evening, everybody. Alex Kane, Alderman, North Ward, 524 Wyndham Hall. I was at that original Planning Commission meeting, like the mayor said, and I remember you looked across the room at me and said, hey, I think we need to start this committee, and I want you to be on it, based on the fact that I don't run the office part of my business out of my home. It's actually done by my business partner, but my business is a private transportation limo type business, even though the term limo is kind of old and blasé now. But we have 24-foot long, 15-passenger Sprinter vans as part of our business, Suburbans and SUVs. There are no graphics or anything on them, but sometimes the van's at my house overnight. It's a 24-foot long vehicle, weighs 8,000 pounds, and different items like that. Now, obviously, I think a lot of this could fall on HOAs because there are a lot of regulations. There's 4 neighborhoods in this community that do not have HOAs. Everybody else does. So look at that. I was very disappointed, and I know I voiced my opinion a few times to the board, to Bowman, to the mayor. It was like we just stopped meeting. The first meeting was great. We had a room full of people and everything, and by the time it came down to it, like Mr. Walker said, there were 3 of us there plus Bart, and that was it. You know, it needed a lot more input. We needed a lot more discussion, but it did seem like every time that we held a meeting, we talked about things, we gave our input to Bart. The next time we got a draft back, none of the things that we brought up were in it. It was, a lot of it was just kind of reworked or reworded. And I'll tell you, when the 2-tiered system came forward, I was against it from the beginning. I thought, how are we to decide that this type of business is going to be regulated different than this business just because of what they did? And then obviously last August, when the city of Nashville had gone through a court case, and it went to the state court appeals and was overturned because they did a 2-tiered system. Basically, if you don't know about the case, a gentleman had a recording studio in his home. He was told he could only have 1 person at his home-based business at a time, but the neighbor down the street had a child daycare, and she had 30 kids and how many parents coming over to the house every day. It was because of the 2-tiered system. The vehicle thing, I think, is the biggest question, obviously, but a lot of our HOAs limit what kind of vehicle can be in your driveway and so on. I think that's what my biggest concern, my last concern is I don't want to see us do something that requires our neighbors to tattle on our neighbors. I mean, I hate to use that term. It comes back from my days of teaching. But that's what it's going to come down to, because we do not have the manpower or the staff to drive around every day and enforce this. You know, it's just, I hate that we get into that. There's got to be a way where we can come up with some kind of a system where if you want to have a business running out of your house, come let us know. We'll tell you, hey, here's what you got to do, what you can't do.
I think that's why we're here today. So.
I think we got to get to that point where it's very simple and very, very, you know, and I was looking at the comparison chart that Bart provided us. A lot of the stuff is already in a lot of our ordinances anyway. So I'd like to see us meet again as an ad hoc committee.
Thank you. One of the things, just real quick, a lot of HOAs are not happy with the fact that they can't seem to enforce some of the things that they want to enforce. And it's been a real issue. So they look to the town, and when we have had complaints, it's not a lot, but when we've had them, it's to the town because their HOA can't do anything about the problem. So
one of the things that if they don't file a physical complaint to marking them on paper or on the computer, then it's not listed. So when it looks like maybe there's not very many people that complain, really there is, and Bart and Mark can tell you that there is. It's just that they don't want to put their name on it because they don't want any sort of blowback from their neighbor. I mean, and Alex touched on that.
So my question is, if there is a complaint, but that's not a written complaint, we do nothing about it?
Mark?
Well, we always try to look into it. If it's a complaint, you know, I'll have, you know, our code enforcement officer go check the site and see what, are you talking about like an anonymous complaint?
Well, like the mayor just said, if someone comes or calls, has a complaint but doesn't want to give their name, what do we do? They're not fulfilling out any paperwork. Are we doing anything about that complaint?
I mean, the problem is they're not going to get any feedback because we don't have any record of who notified us, but normally we'll look into it just because, you know, somebody raised a question to us. It's obviously better to, you know, to have some contact information so we can follow up with whoever it was that had the concern on what we found and that our progress that we're making toward addressing it if we found that there was an issue.
Okay. And by the way, that was a publicly noticed meeting that all of them were, weren't they?
yes.
They were, so
Should have been.
citizens,
Or not,
citizens,
you talking about the,
ad hoc.
no, I don't think those were, because there wasn't any, there wasn't two or more.
Okay, it wasn't enough people to call out, okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Mann, you ought to come up. I just want to make sure we're correct on that.
There we go. My name is Don Mann. I live at 518 MacArthur Lane in Farragut. I live in the Glen Abbey subdivision, and we have a very restrictive HOA. And serving on this citizen forum, or this ad hoc committee, I would just say that I'm so glad I live with an HOA, because the concern are the neighborhoods that do not have it. And I was at the, I guess the planning commission meeting that kicked this whole thing off. The gentleman who had a food truck that the neighbors were complaining about. The gentleman got up at 5 in the morning, turned on his compressor to cool it off, and it bothered his neighbors. And that's where my biggest concern is protecting neighborhoods that do not have an HOA that can stand up and enforce this. So I would like to continue this process. I think we need to protect all neighborhoods from businesses that are disturbing your neighborhood. You don't move into a subdivision to have a food truck next to you, or to have contractors show up every morning with all their crews to disperse them. They leave their parked cars in the driveway, and your neighbors have to look at that. So I am completely supportive of the effort we're making here. I think we need to do a little bit more work on it. There's been some comments that we had not seen the notes that were presented to you tonight. We probably should have seen that. The steering committee probably should have got together one more time before it was presented to you. But I'm all in favor of fine-tuning this. I think it's very important to have protection for neighborhoods that don't want to have businesses, don't want to have trucks, don't want to have deliveries all day long, don't want to have cars parked in the driveway. If you have a nursery school or babysitting, and you have 30 kids running around in the backyards, I don't think anybody's going to want to see that in their neighborhood if it wasn't allowed before you moved in. So those are my feelings. So I'm 100% behind the effort. Probably need to put a little bit more into it to fine-tune this somewhat. I'm glad that the town attorney got involved. I think that was very important from a legal standpoint, especially since there's some case in Middle Tennessee that's might be fighting this. But that's my position on it. I think we're on the right track, just need to fine-tune it some more. Okay?
Thank you.
I'd like, go ahead. I'd like to make one comment. I'm not in a position to state what the town's position is on enforcement, but as a resident who's lived in this town for 20-some-odd years, my opinion is that the town of Farragut doesn't ride around trying to enforce all the ordinances we have. You know, we don't have the enforcement police driving around street by street. What we're trying to do, I think, is establish some procedures so that when we have complaints and people are doing things that really shouldn't be done in one way or another, that we have something to back up doing something about it. So we don't have a police force out there enforcing all this stuff, but we have a mechanism to use when we receive complaints about certain things that is irritating neighbors. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, I'm done.
Bart, I'd like you to step back up. I want to make sure you have enough information. I know there were several areas. Did we cover all the areas that you wanted input on? Is there anything else you'd like to hear from us?
No, I mean, you've touched base on a couple of the standards, and, you know, I think we're gonna have to, you know, look at a couple of the provisions some more, try to flesh out, you know, the vehicle issue some more, and, you know, provide some options for, you know, for you all to look at. You know, we'll just have to, you know, just work on it a bit more, I guess.
Well, when it went to the board before for us to vote on, we decided to go ahead and send it back to the planning commission, and that's where we're at right now. So the discussion is great. I think we've all made some good notes, and we're able to hear from all three of the existing members that were on the ad hoc committee. I know there was others that were on it, but are not here tonight. But I think that that's important that the three were able to discuss what went on in their opinion. And hopefully we can resume this and work on some more of these things that we've got listed here. So.
So, Mr. Mayor, are we charging the committee to reconvene and try to hash out some of these issues? Is that what I'm hearing here? Because to me, there's some ambiguity about what the direction of this ordinance change is. So, I'm trying to encourage some dialogue. I mean, basically what I heard Mr. Walker say is that we've missed the mark, for lack of a better word, that we're not incorporating some things or a lot of things that I thought the committee had supported last year, but I have slept since then, so I don't exactly remember what the committee did and didn't support. But if the committee's gonna reconvene and then try to submit some recommendations to staff and to this planning commission so that we can wordsmith it and finally put this to rest, then I think that's the direction we need to go. But I think the rest of the planning commissioners need to, is that where we are? Or are we just asking staff to work on this?
And
Can we leave here with maybe a plan? I'll agree with that. Leave here with a plan of the meeting and
That's the
time.
reason we're here tonight.
and you want to try to get some additional members on the committee. I don't know, because it was a small group. I don't think you're going to get unanimity on, well, I'm never going to be able to pronounce that, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, consensus.
It's gonna be hard to
a better
get
word,
consensus.
I can say that one. But we can do that, or maybe even try to have a meeting with some of the HOA groups. Bring them involved, because I think the mayor or Ron's point is well taken, that some of these HOAs they exist, but but they don't function that well, and so some of them may not want the burden of having to enforce on some of these issues.
Well, I, for one, can say that I'm kind of ready to move on past this issue. And so we're not, and I know the committee spent a lot of time with it, and obviously there's some frustrations on the committee that we're not incorporating everything, and I don't necessarily think it's our job to incorporate everything, but I'd like to take their recommendations real seriously. So if what we're hearing here and what the marching orders are is for the committee, as many members as the committee can put back together, and if there's an easy ability to invite some of the HOAs to participate again, but quite frankly, I think a lot of folks are just getting burned out on it. They, just, hey, y'all been talking about it for so long, and you're not doing anything. And so I think the action plan is, let's do this. Maybe it's not ready next month, but in a couple of months, we can get something that we can actually ratify and send it up to the board, mayor, and alderman for final approval.
I didn't mean to, suggest that, add HOA members to the committee, but maybe have a meeting with them, like just a feedback meeting.
I definitely think you need to do that, because I met with leaders from 9 different HOAs about 4 weeks ago and threw this by them, and I thought they were going to throw rotten tomatoes at me and say they definitely do not want the responsibility of enforcing this ordinance. So instead of just getting it from me, I think that you all should get it directly from the HOAs. But I don't see them wanting to enforce this.
And then that's not what I'm advocating. I'm just advocating somebody to mention, hey, really what it's about citizen involvement. I mean, we're here, we're all volunteers, we all get paid the big sum of $0 to do this. And what we're really trying to do is determine what the community, at the very least, the majority of the community wants. And it does appear to me tonight that we're not near a consensus in what's presented. And I think that it's been difficult for staff, because you're hearing a lot of different feedback from planning commissioners and maybe HOA presidents and then the committee. So if that's a decent plan, it'd get the committee back together. If you want to invite input, I'm not necessarily saying invite additional committee members. I don't know if that's appropriate, but everybody's input is valuable. And again, we're not gonna get 100% consensus. There are gonna be some folks that say, hey, I wanna park a tractor trailer in my yard, and that is what it is. And some folks that have absolutely no pickup trucks. I mean, I've heard of communities that actually have had that, where you can't even have a pickup truck in your driveway. And that's not what I'm advocating for either. So I do think there's a balance, but what I'm encouraging the folks to do, Brian and his team, since he was kind of the first to speak, get back together and let's I would encourage you to start with the draft the staff has already spent a lot of time on, and line item some issues that you guys have problems with, and then see if there is consensus with staff, and if there's not, well, then we'll hash it out at another planning commission meeting.
That's a good idea. I think you had some major bullet points that I think the group, or how many of them you can get together? I think you had originally, what, 5? Originally, okay. 3 of them are here tonight. All 3 of them had a little bit different things that they wanted to talk about. So, and all good points. So let's see if we can't put this together, see what they can do. I know Mark's got plenty to do, but let's see if we can't do this when you have some time, and where we can get back together and talk about it again.
I just did want to say one thing about like getting input and like putting that committee together. Like y'all said a lot of stuff about like getting HOA presidents in there, but since this does pertain to a lot of business owners, hopefully like when you're putting that together, also get some of those people who are actually running the businesses and have these kinds of vehicles to be able to put in input as well. So it's not just like one side. I know that HOA people are able to listen to their respective community and neighborhoods better than we are, but especially like just being able to have like 2 sides of the conversation there. Just like making sure we have like input from both of those sides, I think would be really important.
Okay, that's really great, because one of the reasons that I appointed Alex Kane, our new alderman at the time, is because he was a home-based business, and also I think Mr. Walker is also a home-based business. So that was 2 out of 5, and I think Shannon is also a home-based business.
Yeah, she is.
And who's the 5th one?
I can't think of his
No, it wasn't
name,
Louise.
honestly. I'm not sure what his name was. Yeah, that's it.
It was who?
I don't remember his first name, Mr. Hill. He was.
Oh, yes, he's another home-based business, come to think of it. So, looks like we had some good input from.
Yeah, and I think obviously we want to be communicating with the chamber as well. They looked at an earlier draft, and we had the 2-tier system, which was more complicated, and I think that's what Alderman Meyer was talking about a little bit, because that was a lot more stuff to have to try to monitor and try to enforce. This ordinance, the one that we presented this evening, this draft, was a much more simplified version. It really took what we have right now and just tried to clean it up a little bit, and add a little bit more specificity to it without trying to not provide for things that would be really hard to regulate. And so we need to look at the deliveries, I think. We need to look at allowing storage and accessory structures. I think that makes sense to me. And then, of course, the vehicle question is a tough one. That's gonna be hard. And we're just gonna have to figure out, we're not probably ever gonna get consensus on that. We just need to think about what are we trying to accomplish with this regulation, and, have some kind of, hopefully, predominant message that can be brought back that most people think is reasonable. So.
The vehicles, I think we need to look at what our other ordinance is to make sure we're not butting heads with it on whether it's,
You mean with RVs?
Yes.
You try to parallel it with the RV ordinance?
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do, yeah.
I
It's
think
just
that's-
regulate the bulk of the thing, and so the RV is a bulky vehicle, and another vehicle that, whether it's commercial or not, is the bulk of it, is what we were looking at. So.
Most RVs plug in, just like an electric car does, and they don't typically run the generator at 5 in the morning, like what the complaint was. So I think that, but still, the size of it's.
Right, it's a noise one.
Yeah.
I just think like if the RV I was just gonna shout, thanks. But if there's not a lot of complaints about the current RV ordinance and it works, it seems very applicable to the 27 footers. That'd be my input.
RV
Just
is
it's
on the
easy.
other side of the, or the back side of the
Right,
house.
right,
So
right.
it kind of does mirror image quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right. Bart, we okay? We good?
Yeah, I'm just writing some notes.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you,
Great.
Bart.
Bart, this is not a 911. We've been working on this for a long time. So, and you guys have a lot of time and energy in this. So don't feel like that this is something, we have to have something for next month. I mean, seriously, this is, well, it's a couple of years we're already into this, so it's okay. I know you guys got a lot on your work agenda, so thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our second discussion item. That would be item 5B. Discussion on modifying the Farragut Code of Ordinances, Appendix A, zoning Chapter 3, Section 1, Agricultural District A, to provide for estate lot regulations.
Yeah, and this is for discussion purposes only. And it's just considering whether we want to look at establishing provisions for subdivisions with like estate lot sizes. Typically, those are 2 acres or more. This was brought up under a citizen forum comment a few months ago to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen by one of the planning commissioners. She's not here this evening, but just to have this, looked at. We currently have about 625 acres that's zoned agricultural in the town. And the thought from the staff is, rather than trying to create another zoning district, which we have a couple that we don't ever use anyway currently, an agricultural zone, to me, would be the logical place to look for trying to provide for some standards for estate lot type subdivisions, if you will. So currently, the agricultural district is a 5-acre minimum lot size. If you're creating a new lot, we have a lot of existing lots of record that are well under 5 acres that are zoned agriculture, and they're grandfathered in. But if you wanted to do a subdivision on property that's zoned agricultural, you'd have to create lots that are all at least 5 acres. We've had a couple of developments that had large lots, like Sassafras Meadows on Dixon Road that Mr. Montgomery developed, the Oak Farm development on Union Road. And what we ended up with those developments was a request for a bunch of variances, because if you remember, given the lot size and the density, a lot of the things that are in our subdivision regulations dealing with street widths and curb and gutter, stormwater detention, open space, didn't really make a lot of sense for these kind of developments because they were kind of open space by nature. They have a lot of space because they didn't have much density associated with them. So those were some of the things that I think we're trying to look at with this proposal. I think one of the strategies, I always go back to look at our plan when we're looking at creating any new ordinance or modifying any ordinance. What does our plan say? Is there something in there that talks about this? And there is. Our plan currently has a strategy that's called to enhance the town's natural identity. And one of the things it's talking about is trying to capitalize on Farragut's history of being kind of a rural community. Before we were the Admirals, we were the Farragut Farmers. Probably, some of you may remember that. I don't remember that, but we pretty much was all farmland out here.
We had the blinking light.
Yeah, I remember when I was going to UT, I thought Farragut was a different country. I mean, we just never ventured that far west. Cedar Bluff was as far as I got, so it was pretty rural. Potentially amending the agricultural zone to allow for smaller lots, but still pretty large, may give people some development options for some of these properties that are zoned agricultural and still have big enough lots to retain some of that rural character. Because there's really not, realistically, there's not a lot of agricultural uses that occur on our properties that are zoned agricultural. I mean, there are some farms and some fields and things, but a lot of them, you know, there's probably going to be requests to try to rezone them to potentially much more dense residential developments that are more economically viable. And this may provide people that have properties zoned agriculture with an option of having a little more viable developability, but still having large enough lots that retain that natural heritage. So that's really all we're trying to look at with this. And again, it's just a discussion item. Y'all may or may not want to do anything with this. I think if we do, I had some discussion items that I thought of just in thinking about this. Currently, the zoning district's called agricultural. I think if we looked at doing something with estate lots, we may want to rename that to something like rural large lot zoning district, because agricultural implies that it's almost purely agricultural. You could still do agricultural in a rural large lot zone. It's just that would also kind of imply more, probably a more realistic use of that land, given where we're at in Knox County. And we're not out in Gibbs or, you know, in South Greene County somewhere where agricultural is probably a legitimate use, but it's really probably not in Farragut long-term. So that's one thing. You know, in general description, also, you know, add some language about providing for potentially large lot development that retains the rural character of those areas rather than focusing so much on agricultural activities. I had a question about the minimum lot size. Some estate zoning is as small as 1.5 acres. I think what we've talked about just at the staff level at least is having the 2 acre as the minimum lot size. So it would still be not dense at all, you know, but it would be half the size of what, or less than half the size of what would be currently required in agricultural. And then just look at the development standards for, if somebody did want to propose a rural large lot subdivision and have development standards in place that kind of take into account the size of these lots, the fact that you're not going to have people parking on the street, you know, it's not dense enough. So why do you need a 26-foot wide street? You don't. But you do need to be able to meet whatever the fire code requirement is, which typically is a minimum of 20 feet. I think we've done that with a couple of those smaller subdivisions. So just looking at stuff like that, allowing for open ditch drainage instead of curb and gutter. Again, trying to retain that rural character. If you had shared use paths, instead of requiring them along the street, because that adds more hardscape, just look at where other connections are in the nearby area and try to make sure that whatever happens on that property takes into account those connections and gets them through to the adjacent properties. And then looking at stormwater detention and open space. You may not need stormwater detention in something that's that, you know, it has that much space and natural green space associated with it, same way with open space. So, and those are some of the things that people have had to request variances from because we just didn't have any standards in place that took that into account for these larger lots. So, and then the final question was if non-residential uses are allowed. We have churches and schools in almost all of our, well, pretty much all of our residential districts, and they're also currently allowed in agricultural district, but they don't have to be. So that's a question, whether we want to provide for those or if there's any other kind of uses that might be compatible with a rural large lot kind of development or plan of development if we want to think about that. So That's what I wanted to get your all's feedback on. I do have one person that has signed up to speak on this item, if you want to hear from them first.
Excuse me.
Since it's discussion.
Yes.
Okay. John Neal, okay, John.
There we go. Gentlemen, my name's John Neal. I live at 6657 Ridge Rock Lane in Knoxville. I'm an attorney, as most of you know. I'm here on behalf of Greg and Beverly Wyberly tonight. And I can speak for myself, not just for them, to say that I'm really troubled by this concept. I grew up as a 4-H'er. I own a farm. So to me, the concept of agricultural zoning and the availability of farming is really important. I also grew up on a 2-acre lot, which is supposedly, under this proposition, going to preserve a rural character to the neighborhood. Well, my 2-acre lot was 2 blocks from the town courthouse.
It was what now?
It was 2 blocks from the courthouse.
Okay.
That's not rural. And you're not going to preserve a rural atmosphere with a house with a 2-acre lot. You're just not going to do it successfully. I think I was looking at your zoning laws, and from 1986 until today, so 40 years, your zoning code said, with respect to the agricultural district, this district provides space for agricultural uses which comprise an important part of the economy and the land use of the town of Farragut. So for 40 years, really, for all practical purposes, since Farragut was created, Farragut's recognized the importance of agriculture. And I grant you, it's only, 650 acres? I'll give you that. But that doesn't change the fact that farming is an important part of our world, an important part of our society. And in my personal view, we shouldn't be making it impossible for people to farm. We shouldn't put them in a situation where their property taxes might go up because of the zoning change, which then makes it impossible for, let's say, the children of a deceased person to keep the family farm. They're forced to sell it. And I think that's a real problem. And I think the Wyberly's property is zoned agricultural. Of course, there's plenty of other people who also have property zoned agricultural who aren't here to talk tonight. But they're being really adversely affected by being forced to move into a completely different kind of zoning. I mean, you're not just modifying agricultural zoning, you're doing away with it if you follow this process. And I think that's really important, that it's not a modification, it's a total destruction of the agricultural zoning and changing it to a situation where you can have 2-acre lots. Now, there's one other issue I got to address, and I don't want to because I don't want to be adversarial. But I'm sure every one of you knows we're already in litigation over greenways. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that calling something a pathway with a grassy median between the road and the pathway, that's just another terminology, another term for greenway. I'm not here to argue that lawsuit. If we ever get into that lawsuit, I guess you'll never see me again, except in a courthouse. But the fact is that I would urge you to reconsider this proposal and not go forward with it, at least until that litigation's over, so you know what the law is on that. It's going to be several years. And I would hope that the town would seriously consider the fact that it's not in anybody's best interest to provoke more legal problems before those questions get answered. If any of you have any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Mr. Neal?
Yes, sir.
What we're talking about here has nothing to do with that. Mr. Weberly's property is, every house zoned, it's zoned. Okay, what we're looking at is, we've had numerous inquiries about somebody that's got a large piece of property that wanted to put some smaller lots on that property for a family, okay? And a lot of times when you say that it has to be X number of acres, then all of a sudden you're limiting what that family can do with this property. At some point, Mr. Weebly may want to do the same thing. I don't know. I don't know his situation, but there are people that live in a town that's got property that would like to have their whole family on one compound, okay? Well, the way it is right now, they really can't do that. They don't have enough land to put everybody on there. Steve Williams had a situation where if you look at his property, he had enough property to where he could put 13, actually, pieces on there, okay? He wanted to put a cul-de-sac in and do that. And that would be everybody, I guess, in his family. I don't know. But
Well, if it was me, I wouldn't want to live that close to my
well,
family.
you're not the only one. But,
You don't know my children.
but that's the situation where I think this is getting into the weeds on what we're talking about here because really, I think when you look at some of the farming that we do now, okay, I'm not sure about Mr. Weebly and how he farms, but or if he does, but I do know that you look at what kind of farms do we have? We have horse farms, okay, and we have a number of them. A lot of people don't realize that, but we do. And we've also got hay farms, okay? And I don't think either one of those are going away anytime soon. So I don't think we're going to trample on their rights in this at this time. So I think what we're looking at here is a little bit different than what you're talking about. And so I understand Mr. Weebly's concern. You know, he's got a nice piece of property up there, and he'd like to leave it the way it is. So I don't see a problem why he shouldn't. So.
Well, Mayor, I guess we say you and I respectfully disagree with each other. But
That's been the case.
But I
at
do
times,
respect
okay?
I do respect your opinion, and I understand that.
Hey, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
I think the real easy solution to Mr. Neal's concern is instead of renaming the agricultural district, we just create a new we create a new large lot residential district. And that would solve the problem of somebody who's in agricultural feeling like that they're getting shoehorned into something that they don't want to be in.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, I always look at what we have and do we ever use it? That was my rationale. It's kind of like that R1 SA zone that we ended up rezoning all of Bel Air to that because nobody ever used it. And so that was my rationale behind that. But if there's concerns about that, then that's another direction we could certainly go in and look at trying to create a district for this with potentially a 2-acre minimum lot size, if that's what y'all feel would be a better way to deal with it. Yeah, we're open to that. That's why this is just a discussion item, so I appreciate that comment.
I wasn't trying to jump ahead of anybody on discussion, but it was, with Mr. Neal standing there, I want to make sure that we were on the same page, okay? Even though he disagreed, okay?
I mean, I still have a farm where I grew up on a farm and still have a farm. And so I appreciate agricultural, trust me. I'm just looking at the reality, frankly, of West Knox County and what you're likely to really see in the rest of the properties that are zoned agricultural, and just trying to have something in there that would be an option for somebody to do something with it, but still not have such a dense development, you know, to try to keep it as rural as you can. And I'm looking at the streets, I'm looking at not just the lot size, but all those things that come into play that kind of keep something more rural than we would normally see in a traditional subdivision.
Mayor, I think I had about 20 seconds left. So if you'll let me, I think that's.
I burned some of your time, so go ahead.
I think that's a pretty good idea. If somebody has a farm and they want to cut it up into a subdivision, 2-acre lots, they should be able to.
I think Noah's ideal is a great ideal to.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I know to go ahead and say we're going to create another zoning district, but in this case, I think it kind of, a few fits. You probably
it
are
does
aware.
fit.
Okay.
See, sometimes you and I agree.
I'm just gonna just try to remind everybody, I think Louise's intent on this was that we wanted to encourage and/or incentivize folks that had larger pieces of property, that you don't necessarily have to go in and rezone and put in quarter-acre lots, or even R1, which is kind of our biggest typical residential zoning district, which is half-acre lots, that we wanted to incentivize somebody to do something different, like what the Montgomerys did on Dixon Road, or what's been done on Union Road. And so what she was trying to do, and she's not here, but I think she would agree with me, is she was trying to memorialize it. That way, when somebody from the outside looking in sees all of our zoning districts, they don't feel like, well, I have to do this one, and I have to do this one, or this one. Like, oh, wait a second, here's something a little bit different that there's definitely a market for. There's nothing punitive in what we're trying to do tonight to anybody in the town of Farragut. If anything, we are trying to encourage the kind of the rural character, maybe a little narrower roads, maybe just ditches on either side of the road, kind of like, you know, what we all, maybe not all of us, but most of us kind of grew up with a long time ago, that, you know, things that just were a little bit different. And if the infrastructure costs are less, then maybe a developer might look at it and say, you know what, I can still net a bottom line of this because I'm reducing expenses, even though my total number of available lots is less than it would otherwise be because they're minimum of 2 acres. So I think what we're doing is very honorable, and I think the community would ultimately appreciate it. And we sure didn't mean to step on anybody's toes and you know, try to force feed anything. I think what we were trying to do is say, hey, agriculture, the particular zoning district that Mr. Wyberly's farm is on is probably kind of a thing of the past, and so let's kind of update it. And it was not to try to put a square peg in a round hole. It is say, hey, let's incentivize this. So I promise you, our intent with this and the staff's intent was honorable in creating options for folks that are gonna ultimately sell and develop their farms.
Anything from down that way?
Anybody else have anything to say?
Do those comments, does that sound reasonable, looking at the development standards, the 2 acre? Y'all think 2 acres is probably reasonable? Okay. Well, we'll work on that then and proceed with looking at creating a district for this separate then. Thank you.
All righty. Next up on the agenda is approval of utilities.
We do not have any.
Okay. What about citizens forum?
I have no one signed up.
All right. If that's the case, the time is approximately 7:59 and the meeting is adjourned.